this farm, a dairy farm, is now 450 acres. Originally it was something like 150 or 80. What was it?
Yeah, 120 for a start.
He has bought more and more land when other conventional farms have gone out of production. It was a totally bare farm, no trees at all, and you see everywhere here tree lines now. Every paddock has its own wind protection, and it is good for stock to be in bush. And in winter, when we feed the hay outside in winter, or silage, but in winter it's generally hay. We never have stabled cattle or sheep, and the ground could suffer from the weight of a trailer and tractor putting hay out, and then he can use the trees and put it out near there or in there, and the ground doesn't suffer. These small paddocks are necessary to rotate the cattle in parts of Earth, especially North Europe, Scandinavia, and even North Germany, because of the short summer season relative to Italy or to us. They say we can only have grow one crop, and pasture management is the most important to actually improve soil structure and development of farms. The most important, more important than any other form of agriculture that I can think of. And so that rotation is so important that for cows, we could stop here a moment and you look out into this pasture. We could even walk in there. You can see white flowers. There is white clover showing, and the grass ideally for cows to eat should be maybe 20 to 30 centimeters high. This here is too short at the moment, although many would be glad to have that clover and let their cows in there. And we feed a paddock like that. You use an electric fence, yes. Shifted daily or twice daily?
Twice daily.
Yeah, twice daily. So did I. And so they get to be filled about to 85%, not to 100%. If you let them eat as much as they would like to eat, they're like children with ice cream. They eat too much, and they actually don't produce anywhere for it. You have to keep them in an active condition, so 85% with the electric fence, you can judge that. The deer, wild deer that we have quite a few in our area, European deer that some or other got loose, they eat every second day. They don't eat every day. In nature, cows would not have eaten 100% or 120% like our dairy cows will do. They will gorge themselves too full. So we have to control that. If we control the grazing, so the paddock this size for the herd, how many do you milk now?
150.
150.
Yeah. A paddock that size will cut in half, so they'll be in the morning in the bottom half and the night time in the
yes.
back half.
So it is easy to manage, and then the manure has to be harrowed. We have pictures taken worldwide on pastures. 50 and in some cases 80% of the pasture are old heaps of manure, I know of a farm in England milking 300 cows, and they lost 90 cows in one go through TB, and the bacteria will be in the old manure, which stinks. High grass, the cow are let into high stalky grass that has no clover. You can control the clover to a degree through rotation. If clover will only grow if the pasture is short, and if it's too high, it is suppressed by the grasses, and every paddock should, if possible, within 2 years be cut for hay or silage, and in the early grazing or mid-spring, you will try to allow the grasses to come to head. They don't actually have to come to seed as long as they have flowered. Each plant wants to do that, and after that the ryegrass and cocksfoot and whatever else will not try to come to head so much, because for that year they have done that. Whereas every 2 years you allow it to go to a height for grow to a height suitable for hay, and the roots go down. Now, a biodynamic farm should all the time be in activity and not have pastures languishing. If you have very tall grass and stalky grass, nothing goes on in the soil underneath anymore. Some people think the roots go down deep, and that is not true. They stop growing. But if you keep the pasture in rotation and graze it several times at the right height to get the right amount of milk, you have a strong root activity, just the same as you have on top of the plants. In the early conversion days, you may have to use our ripping plow, and later on, how do you use it very often now?
When we're renovating a paddock.
Yes.
So we may only do 1 or 2 paddocks a year.
Yes, so it might be 10 years before you do it again.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, more.
Maybe more with so much land there, yeah.
My pastures, I can see whether a pasture is what I call a working pasture or just a good-looking pasture. This one here, you see the hay in it. You can go back to it. Is that hay you fed out there, or
No.
is it actually grass you topped?
Yeah, we topped.
You see, anything left standing after the cows come off, and it's very important, we top, and it gives new material to compost and become humus for even late this year, or not this year anymore, but in this season, but certainly for next year. We don't top every time, because if it is very lush grass, very leafy grass, they eat everything. There's nothing left standing, and you just have to harrow it. And at some times of the year, they're trying to come to a stalk, and the stalks have to be cut. Weeds on a biodynamic farm are eaten, whereas on conventional farms they would be a nuisance. But sometimes there is some weeds that have to be cut too. So you see the dry grass on that paddock, that is a mulching activity. For cutting, you want to have an implement that cuts the grass cleanly and doesn't fizzle it. If there some slashers are too thick, and even if they're sharp, they don't cut
bruise
the grass cleanly, and as the grass should regrow with the frazzled ends, it bleeds a while and dies back, whereas if clean cut, it grows straight on again. These are all finer points that have to be considered. the major is to have a continuous rotation within the biology of the farm, of the pasture, and with each pasture thing. And how many such paddocks have you for grazing?
Well, we've got 90 paddocks all
you
up.
Take that on the camera. You have how many paddocks?
90.
90.
Yep.
Yes, that's the most I've heard of.
So we'll have the milking cows will be rotating through one area, and let's put it up the right way. Milking cows will be rotating through here, and I'll have one group of heifers rotating here and another group of heifers here. So we have.
Yes.
And Maury Fennell explained this to me once. It's like clockwork. You have a little group here, and the dry cows here, and the milkers there, and it's all like a big clockwork, all rotating within. So we have offer fresh pasture to each group all the time. As we go around here, these paddocks have been topped, and this was the last one in this group. So as we go back, you'll see how the biology has taken that cut grass and turned it back into the soil and turned it into humus, and you'll see the grass gets better. Well, there's more growth on the paddocks as we go around there. There's also some harrows down here we can have a look at too.
And
these paddocks here are summer pasture, permanent pasture. The ones on the right are our annual pastures that really only grow through winter and spring.
now I have to explain that. This is here a country. Is it 16-inch rain average? Yeah, something like that. 16-inch rainfall average. It used to be, before irrigation, cropping land for wheat or whatever, when it was dry land. And since it is laid out for irrigation, that all happened after the war here, it has become able to be dairied, or they have orchards, and they have this beautiful clover. Look into the paddock with the thing, all this white. It's a beautiful pasture, like you would have in Kent in England or in Wales, and that is obtained with irrigation. And there is not enough water for each farm to keep the whole farm working all year round, so they have so-called summer and winter paddocks. The summer paddocks are white clover, dominant, and grasses and other legumes, and the summer paddocks are dry over summer. This year there has been more rain and they are still green, but they are dry over summer and bare, and they are started with irrigation in March. That is into winter with us, but still autumn, and it can be still 35 degrees. And so they come away with subterranean clover and annual ryegrasses. They provide the bulk of the hay or silage for next year, but an irrigation farm doesn't need to conserve so much feed because it has irrigation water. But I myself always like to have at least 1 year's hay supply there in case there's no water or whatever the reason may be, no rainfall. So you always provide ahead. But what water right have you? What percentage of the farm is winter and what percentage summer pasture?
Maybe a quarter is summer pasture, irrigated over summer, and the rest is in a mix of loose.
Now, slowly, here are harrows.
Come down and have a look if you like.
Just film that. Go outside, maybe.
So these harrows, when we pull them between paddocks, we pull them long ways, and then once we get out into the paddock.
Instead of the steel harrows that are on my tractor, this is much wider. It can be pulled straight through with a chain, a gate, or it doesn't take a big tractor, and he can pull it from there and smear the paddock. Behind you is a paddock that has just been slashed.
Top here. This is a winter pasture of fescue that goes quite flowers and seeds this time of year, so we top it just to get a bit of fresh growth.
It is all flood irrigated. The delivery channels are higher than the paddocks, and there are bays. There's
banks.
one there. So the water runs very carefully laid out, so the whole lot is serviced with water. And if you have it too wide, this is actually very wide here, too wide, then it will run more on the one side and over water, and the other doesn't get any. So that is all very controlled, the irrigation. And then there's the drainage. And on this farm, every time I've been here, there are drainage channels and major drainage channels nearby that are full. And that is similar to having a farm right near a river, and that water in the drainage side helps keep the water in the paddocks and creates a fertility. And of course, all these tree lines stop the wind drying the area too quick. It keeps it warmer, and it keeps the cattle healthier. They are not well, bled white, so to say, by that wind. That wind is terrible.
It's the shade protection in summertime too.
Yeah, and shade.
We
that
get
is
hot
very
summers
important.
40 degrees, and cattle appreciate the shade.
Yeah. And what you have to do when you have to look, I'm describing the whole round of the year, and I have to add, I never knew which paddocks I will lock up for hay. And with 90, that would be a job. They lock themselves up. When they get too high for ideal grazing, then you let them go and cut them for hay and go not to the next two paddocks maybe, but to the third one, which is just the right height, which is about this high, and you get the maximum in milk. And performing an all-round activity like I have now described, well, I have paddocks that have not been ploughed or sown down for 50 years. And they have some native grasses in, which is good, and a great variety of other grasses, European grasses and whatever. And they can take hard conditions, either dryness or too much rain in our case. We're in a high rainfall area. Here at 16, I think we were 64, which is the highest for anywhere in Australia for pasture work. And so you hold the paddocks. We can have it very wet, and I don't put them onto good pasture. I then have some hill paddocks that are better drained, and I put them there and feed them more hay. In New Zealand they have concrete, maybe an acre of concrete, and they put the cattle on there and feed them hay to keep them off the pastures and busting them. Trevor Hatch is actually thinking of doing it after the last winter. But with these harrows behind, if the cows have pugged up a paddock, you can smoothen that over, and where you have the biological conditions that we have on our farm, it's amazing how after two harrowings or so, you wouldn't know it had been packed up. It grows together again, the soil and the structure. So I think I've covered most. What have I forgotten?
Now we can go and have a look at some of the rotational grazing we've got, especially with the young stock and the cattle over there.
Yeah, okay.
We've got a paddock down here we call a bush paddock. It's about 10 acres of trees planted every 10 metres, and we use that in winter time for our dry cows.
Very good.
We just lock them in there and just feed them hay. We have a stack of hay just through the trees there.
Yeah.
And they can pug that area and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The trees keep them warm, and it's amazing how well they do. Even though there's no grass there, we just keep.
You speak so. Can you hear that?
We just keep feeding them lots of hay in the sheltered area. And the cattle
every farm should have that, and I have it naturally. I'm not in a flood irrigation area, although I flood irrigated.
You have hills though. With that, you have hills.
I have hills. I know. This is all flat. Yeah.
Except in the flood, there was 2 foot of water over that, so it was a bit wet.
Yes.
Okay, these harrows are only good in flat country. They're no good in hilly country because they're too rigid. So they work well in this area. But these harrows are actually too heavy. I'm going to make another set using only car tyres because whilst this works well, it doesn't need to be this heavy. Because we're harrowing the manure every day or every second day, it's very fresh, so we don't need big heavy harrows like this.
No.
So we'll use car tyres, we'll make it lighter, it's easier on the frame and it's easier to tow with the tractor. So and when it gets really wet, we can't move this up the lane sometimes because it fills up with mud and you have to wait till it dries out. So I need to make an even lighter set. But
Well, a lot have cut the tyres in half.
yeah, we tried that, but it bounced too much. See, I made this with the frame
Yeah,
on
but
top.
it grabs the manure better.
Yeah, but when the manure is so fresh, we don't need
Yeah,
that.
you don't
we
need
just
it.
need
No,
to knock
here
the top
you
off
don't
it.
need it.
Yeah, but if,
Yeah.
if for a beef
See,
farmer you need to...
It's
do
very easy to farm on this flat country.
No, it's not.
And they don't have a frame like this. They have them just connected with bolts,
Yeah.
and they can move more. So
We originally had a railway line in front and we had each tyre on the back, but we found we kept wearing out the bar in the front. It would grind on the gravel in the tracks, and because we're harrowing every day, we wear them out in no time. So they're only lasting a couple of years. Whereas this one's got all the weight on top and puts it all onto the tyre, so the
I
tyres
haven't
can wear
seen
out.
one quite like that. Each one makes his own to suit the
We
necessities.
adapt them, yeah.
Yeah. And I have I have to buy a new bit of harrows because I have the Murray harrow. I just kept it. I can lift it and it's off the road.
Yeah.
But mine is only 12 foot wide.
Yeah.
And with this here, it would take you a quarter of an hour to harrow that paddock.
Do a paddock like that, yeah.
It's no time, and you wouldn't need a big tractor.
No, 40 horsepower.
Yeah.
There's plenty.
Yeah. That is not going to over-fertilize. And in a very short time, the bacteria, it's just vanished. The manure has vanished. Yes, you come and look at the soil.
This was quite a poor paddock a few years ago, and we worked it up. And one year I had some lower quality hay, and I just put the heifers in here, and I just coated the whole thing with this poor hay because they're only eating about half it. But it just gave a real good mulch to the whole paddock. Then we ploughed it in, and then a year after that I put the rehabilitator through there. The first time we had it, this was the first paddock we did. And it just opened it up really nicely. And you see the mix of
roots right through, and that goes a long way further.
And the thing is, this was only irrigated last night. There's still water sitting on top.
Yeah.
But this actually, it doesn't look too wet here.
No.
The soil's coping with it well, even though there's moisture moving through. And by this afternoon, all these puddles will disappear anyway. So it's quite good.
Well, where is that area that was so bad? That is here about, is it?
In this paddock?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the whole paddock was never grew much. It was always
the water has certainly gone in well.
Oh, that just ran down the thing there, but you see that
there's still lots of roots.
The roots
right
are still
down.
going right down. Yeah, that's quite good.
You can hear it.
It's soft, yeah.
Can we go to look at the neighbour's soil?
Yep, we'll have a look when we go back past
Yeah.
past his place. Yeah.
He doesn't stand there with a gun as it's a case of...
I shouldn't wear this shirt.
Fitzpatrick.
I shouldn't wear this shirt when I'm looking in his place because you can see it too easy.
Yeah.
But these, if we just smooth them out like this, the grass comes through, and there's no. What we notice with our pastures is we don't see the clumps that the conventional farmers do.
Well, that's over fertilized and the rest hasn't got enough. If we go into a paddock like that, I can show that they overgraze in between the heaps, and there is clover this size leaf, and it gradually dies out and never gets any manure.
The conventional farmers now don't sow clover when they sow pasture because they use nitrogen to the end.
Actually, in Gippsland, they put urea on after every grazing.
Yeah.
And
that's best practice.
Instead of having clover and getting free nitrogen and a much healthier food for stock. It is unbelievable. It's a typical conventional pasture in a very rich area. Everywhere are the cow pads, heaps, which were not harrowed out as we prescribe. It should be spread, so the cattle will not touch that. It's bitter because of the nitrogen, that excess nitrogen that is water solubly in the manure of cows, and they graze the rest harder and harder, and the clover there becomes very small or dies altogether. And in England, in such a pasture, much worse than this, there is years of heaps here, but in England, 300 cow dairy farm lost 90 cows in 1 year on TB testing. Those bacteria can be in the manure heaps. It's a stinking mess underneath if you scrape it up, and that is exactly what we don't want in biodynamics and why we harrow the pastures. Very uneven, and you see all the pock marks from the not harrowing the manure. And now go in a bit and we will do a digging. This has just been irrigated. You can feel it is much harder just walking. Here, he has to put his full weight on.
It's this is the best paddocks on his farm too.
The best on his farm. Yeah, now just look at this. See, there's a little bit of biological activity right off the front, and it's just clay with nothing. Straight after.
And just roots going sideways.
And the water doesn't.
They used to call that bit on top humus. They didn't know what it was. And you see it splits off, and then underneath there is nothing. And the hole is yellow. Just take it away and look, it's just clay. Is it stinking?
It stinks. Yeah.
Yeah, just smell it. It's yeah. Now that is only just next door. Yeah. And you see this unevenness. To me, I can see what smells there.
Yeah.
In the growth.
But just note how small and stunted the clover is here.
Yeah.
When we go to see our milking cows, we'll see what it's like over there.
Yeah, and it's there's a bit of clover and then there's a lot of nothing.
A lot of bare ground. See, when these cows graze this, they're pulling these tufts out.
Yeah.
Because I went past one day and there's no root structure. The cows are grabbing the grass and just pulling it straight out.
Pulling the whole bunch out.
The whole plant comes out. It's like if you grab one of these, it probably just... Some of them were just ripping out, like this dead one.
Yeah.
And what happens when you don't harrow that, the soil goes quite acidic under there. And when
that is where the
actually some worms there, which is
much worse in England, and where they have the bacteria then.
But when that eventually breaks down and dies, it may take 6 or 12 months. That's when the first thing will grow there will be a weed. So you'll see some,
they will grow. Thistles will grow there, or docks for the acidity to take the acidity away. Nature puts an acid-loving plant there, and that's how they get their weeds.
And rushes are quite often a sign of that acidity. These pasture paddocks are a little bit past their ideal grazing stage, but we were irrigating here a few days ago, so I didn't want to put the cows on while it's wet, so we have to wait a couple of days, and hence it's gone a bit too mature. But after they come out of this paddock, we'll then top it and cut any excess grass off. You can see in that paddock next to it there, that's where they were yesterday. So they've actually grazed it pretty right. They've just left a few clumps behind. And when we mow that down, it'll spread the cow pads out and take the top off that ryegrass that's going to seed, so it'll spring back with new growth underneath.
They're very good cows. I was once with people in a herd and looking at cows, and I didn't take notice of one sufficiently, and suddenly I said, "Hup," and she had lifted me up.
Yeah,
She wanted to be seen too.
There's a little Jersey like that, isn't
there?
That is a very good cow there, the dark, the middle one of these three, and also this one. You see, you want a fine flat bone. They are all very fine boned. You want a flat rear end, wide, and the pin bones, they're but on either side of the tail. So there is room for a vessel, like a hanger, and you want a high attachment of the udder at the back. That is an old Jersey. She would have had 5 or 6 calves. She's very fine boned. She is now not standing naturally, but the vessel has remained like of a younger cow. This here is a very beautiful heifer. And you must watch how they walk. She is not kicking her udder, and is well attached. It's a very good herd. They're actually all good. This dark one is a little bit uneven at the back, but they're all very good cows. I could go to everyone and lead her because I had trained them for shows. Yeah, we haven't. Here is a cow, an old cow, with the back to us there. Her vessel is a bit longer. That's the only one who hasn't got a very good vessel, but she's milked out well. If the vessel is too low, they kick it, and then you get mastitis. I want to know what this thing is you have in your hand.
So the rotation on these paddocks at the moment, we're here about 3 weeks ago, and we cut these paddocks in half, so they have half in the daytime, and then they'll have the bottom half tonight. So
the growth here at this time of the year with water is this much a day.
It's very good,
yeah.
But the quality of the clover here compared to the neighbour's place.
Yeah. Look at
this. Has never been artificially fed at all. He's put lots of things on those paddocks, but this year has been a very good year for the whole district for clover. But it's interesting to see the neighbour's place.
Yes.
Got no clover.
Yes. When they are dry and not milking, they can go like that. But she is also a bit heavy in bone and has a big head. I don't like them so big.
Sorry,
she doesn't like what I'm saying.
These haven't been topped this year at all.
I can see that.
So that's why there's a few docks and things sticking up there. But
this is very posh. These gates for water.
They're automatic.
Are they now automatic, are they?
So we don't have to get up.
It used to be a shovel and a hole, and you would.
So we went for a drive for a start around the old farm around here, and we've just come down here. And this part here is a new farm that we bought about 3 years ago. Now Alex used to like standing on this bridge here and looking into the neighbour's place because there was all dead trees here, and he'd look this way and then he'd look that way, and then he'd say it was black and white. It was so contrasting.
No.
And I met this farmer at a clearing sale one day, and he said to me, he started to go down the biological farming path, and he said, "But I've looked over your fence and your place doesn't look any different to mine." And I thought, well, there's someone who'll never change.
No, they're just
How many cows do you have?
150 milking cows, and then with heifers and everything else made up, it's probably nearly 300 head all up. Alex, these areas here is the drainage channel that they make as fence off to keep the cattle out. But I use these areas in wintertime if it gets too wet, if I want to spell the pastures, I can actually lock the cows in here and feed them hay.
Yeah, that's very good.
And protect the farm. So we've put troughs in there so we can actually confine stock in there, and that works out well. Up here, these heifers here, we're shifting the fence every second day for them. So I'm just going to do that now so you can have a look at them and the lucerne. You'll see this has been irrigated in the water. You can see where it stopped. The water ran out about here somewhere, so you see the difference in the growth.
They've still got plenty of feed there, but they don't think so.
I don't like to graze the lucerne too hard because it knocks it round, so I come over and I shift the fence, and they all just come in there. But we use 2 fences so they can't go through the next section.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm just going to go and shift that fence so you can jump and watch me if you want.
You have now prepared the next paddock for them.
Yep. So then, not tomorrow, the next day we'll come move this fence. Actually, we'll go into the next paddock because we've given them half what's left. So there's enough feed there for 2 days for them.
Anthroposophists can stick to some words or items and, for instance, claim that this is all not biodynamic because the cows have no horns on. Today, to economically exist, you have to have big herds, and I would like some of these people who talk about horns having their cows stabled, which is most unhealthy, and maybe letting them out a little bit. Ours are out 24 hours a day and every day of the year, which is much better. Horns can be trained. If you have 2 little horns like this in calves, you can put holes in and put wire on, and the horns grow like this, and they can't injure each other as much with such horns. You can gradually breed very quiet cow families with any sort of horn that don't horn each other, but that takes many decades to get to that stage. You can't throw a good cow out because she's got horns that are dangerous, so it is something one can work on. I do prefer to have horns on them, and I know if you take horns off a cow, she is not a sprite, she becomes more dumb. We knew it very well when we were showing cows, but I had a small herd and I could keep most of the cows' horns on, with some cows not. So it is a growing factor and a development factor, but it is not a critical factor at all. But people who know nothing about dairying, they will pick up on, oh, they should have horns, Steiner said so. See, this is the Steiner said so story, and that is absolutely idiotic. Overall, I'm very happy with this film. There's nothing to be edited. I thought there would be. I've made 2 mistakes. Once I said summer pasture when it should have been winter pasture, and once I said should not be harrowed when I meant should not be slashed. So that'll wake you up, listeners. But I find that my speech is losing capacity. I understand from Jasminka that she can understand it quite well. I can't, but of course my ears aren't so good either. So I hope I can still lecture and my speech is not too unclear, but the content of this film, which I mainly made for the dairy farmer in Bergerac, and it will be sent now to Aurelia to give to him, but it is of value to all the other countries too, to show how important proper pasture management is in building up soil, and this is what it does beautifully.